The laughter was soft, but it cut like glass. My sister lifted her wine and said, "Where's your husband and kids, Nancy?" "Oh, right. You don't have any." My parents laughed with her. I just sat there, smiling the way you do when you realize you're the only one not in on the joke. For a second, I couldn't feel my hands. I'd paid their debts, saved their house, yet somehow, I was still the punchline at their table. That was the night something inside me cracked. My name is Nancy Monroe, and that silence after their laughter? It didn't end the night, it started everything that came after. Every March, I drove back to Scottsdale, to the same brown house I once helped my parents save when the bank threatened to take it. They said a real family never leaves each other behind. I used to believe that. That night, the house glowed with amber light, heavy with the smell of barbecue and cheap perfume. Laughter bounced off the walls, the kind that sounds too loud in small rooms. I sat at the end of the table, a glass of red wine warming in my hand, watching the people I called family sparkle for each other. When the toast came, April leaned forward, her smile slicing through the chatter. Words that turned the air to glass spilled out of her, and the table erupted. My father laughed. My mother laughed. I forced myself to do the same, the sound breaking before it left my throat. Forks clinked. The clock ticked. Something cold crawled up my spine. I stared at the faces I'd spent years protecting, the ones whose mortgage payments and debts had eaten my 20s, and realized I'd become the easiest target at their table. After dinner, I stacked dishes in silence. From the kitchen doorway, I heard my father's low voice. "Don't let her find out. The bank called again. We'll handle it next month." My mother murmured back. "She always does." I froze. The words bled into me like paint running down a wet canvas. I left before the candles burned out. Behind me, the yellow light stretched across the wet pavement, long, thin, and breaking in the middle, like a crack in something I could never mend. A week after that dinner, when the last snow began to melt, I found a thick envelope waiting in my mailbox. Wells Fargo Mortgage Division. I tore it open without thinking. Bills. Maybe another reminder from the university. Then I saw the number. $70,000. A secondary mortgage. Under my name. I almost laughed. Must have been a mistake. I'd never taken out a loan in my life. But at the bottom of the page, in smooth blue ink, was my signature. Every curve, every loop, perfectly mine. I called my father. The moment he picked up, he sounded casual, distracted, probably some mix-up. He said, "You worry too much." My mother's voice floated in next. "Syrup, sweet. April just needed a little help. Honey, you know how family works. No one keeps score." I didn't answer. I could hear my heartbeat drumming in my ears. Slow, heavy, cold. That night, I sat in front of the canvas I'd left unfinished. A house baked in sunlight, its windows blacked out. I stared until the colors blurred. Something was missing. Or maybe something had been taken. The next morning, another email arrived. An automated confirmation from the bank. Account access, IP address, Scottsdale, Arizona. I froze. I hadn't been anywhere near Arizona that week. Someone had signed my name, from their house, not mine. I drove straight to Denver to meet Erin Davis, a former student of mine who'd become a financial lawyer. Her office smelled of coffee and printer ink. The glow from her monitor cut through the gray light. "You're certain you never signed anything?" she asked. "Never." She flipped open a folder. This loan was approved through electronic signature, verified through an email account. Daniel Monroe, Azid. The air left my lungs. Daniel Monroe, my father. Silence spread between us like spilled ink. I thought of him teaching me to write my name when I was 18, his hand guiding mine on the first bank form I ever signed. And now that same hand had forged me, turned me into collateral. Erin's voice softened. "Do you want to press charges?" I looked out the window. Snow fell in long white threads, melting into the asphalt under the streetlights. "I don't know," I said. "If I report it, I lose them. But if I stay quiet, I lose myself." She slid the file toward me. "You don't have to decide tonight. Just keep the evidence. Identity theft doesn't disappear." I walked out into the cold, the wind cutting against my face until it burned. In my head, My father's whisper from that night echoed again. Don't let her find out. Now I understood. They already knew I would find out. They were just counting on me to stay silent. The snow kept falling, covering every trace of the road home, and I realized I wasn't sure where home even was anymore. The road back to Scottsdale looked endless beneath the storm. Snowflakes drifted like chalk dust over the windshield, erasing the lines between night and morning. The radio hummed a jazz tune I used to play while painting, now warped and hollow. I wasn't sure if I was driving there for answers or goodbyes. Every mile felt like a year I'd spent keeping that house standing, another sacrifice I hadn't meant to make. It was almost 11 when I pulled into the driveway. The house blazed with light, warm in a way that felt suffocating. My father sat in front of the TV, my mother arranging silverware, April scrolling her phone. I placed the envelope from the bank in the middle of the table. Dad looked up, startled but defensive. You came late, he muttered. You should have called first. My voice stayed even. Whose signature is that? He gave a short, dry laugh. Family shares everything. What's yours is ours, not the law, I said, not my name. The room went still. My mother's breath hitched, tears already starting as she whispered about helping April open her store. April shot up, voice rising, saying I didn't need money, that I lived alone, no one to take care of, no one to spend on. I felt my throat tighten. You're wrong. I have something you've never had, self-respect. April slammed her glass down, shards scattering across the table. You think you're better than us? My father's hand struck the wood hard enough to rattle the plates. Enough! If I hadn't signed, this house wouldn't exist. I looked around the room. The house I'd paid taxes on, repaired, saved. I spoke quietly, each word deliberate. Without me, it would have been gone years ago. It's gone now anyway. The only difference is this time, I won't save it. I put on my coat and stepped outside. Snow swallowed the noise behind me. The storm had spent itself. The wind was still. And for the first time in years, so was I. 3 days later, rain washed over Boulder in gray sheets. I was midway through class when my assistant told me someone was waiting downstairs. It was April. She looked smaller than I remembered, hair plastered to her face, clutching a worn handbag to her chest. I led her up to the studio. The white light caught her skin, pale and tired, making her look like a child lost in the wrong decade. Don't file the case, she pleaded. If you do, they'll lose the house. Mom will die from the stress. I kept cleaning my brushes, the turpentine biting my nose. She tried again. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just thought you'd help, like always. I answered softly. You didn't mean to, but you still did. You keep thinking I was born to pay for everyone else's mistakes. Her sobs cracked the air. I'm pregnant. Nancy, please. The words hollowed the room. I turned toward her. And what will you teach that child? That lying is how you survive? She shook her head, crying harder. I just want to start over. Then start. I said, start by owning what you did. She dropped to her knees, grabbing my hands. I'll pay it back. I swear. Just don't let it go to court. I crouched, slowly prying her fingers loose. April, I've spent too long saving everyone else. This time, I'm saving me. She left, her footsteps vanishing under the sound of rain against glass. I stood there for a while, watching water trail down the window like veins of silver. On the easel, my unfinished painting waited. A house split clean in half, light bursting through the crack like lightning. That light filled the room, harsh and pure. It showed me everything I'd tried not to see. The call came early Monday morning. Erin's voice was calm, but carried that quiet finality only lawyers use when something irreversible is about to begin. The bank, she said, would move forward with legal proceedings unless I filed my own complaint. If I stayed silent, they'd attach the entire debt to me. I stood by the window watching the frost melt along the wooden frame, thin wisps of vapor fogging the glass. Go ahead, I told her. There was a pause long enough for me to hear my own heartbeat. Are you sure? She asked. Once you start, you can't undo it. I already stopped going back a long time ago. I said. 3 days later, my family's name appeared in the Arizona Financial Tribune. Monroe family under investigation for bank fraud. Wells Fargo confirms internal review. The phone rang that evening. My father's voice cracked through the line, trembling with anger. Do you have any idea what you're doing? You're destroying your parents' reputation. You destroyed it first. I answered, We're family. Nancy! Family doesn't forge signatures to pay its debts. I hung up. My hands shook, not from fear but from grief, for the man who once taught me honesty was non-negotiable. Later that night, an email arrived from my mother, 5 pages long, filled with stories of sacrifice, her words stitched with guilt. She wrote about hard years, medical bills, her love for April, and how a mother's love could never be wrong. At the end, she begged, Don't turn us into enemies. You're the best part of this family. I read every line and replied with one sentence. Love isn't alone. Mom. The next day, Erin stopped by my studio, placing her hand over the thick file on my desk. You'll win, she said quietly. But be prepared. Winning this will feel lonelier than losing ever did. I met her eyes. I've been alone for years. Erin, I just finally know why. That night, I sat surrounded by paperwork, the contracts, the statements, the pieces of a life measured in numbers. The white light above my easel reflected off the window, showing a stranger's face staring back at me. Tired eyes, steady breath, calm resolve. I dipped my brush into white paint and covered the darkest part of the broken house on my canvas. For the first time, I understood that sometimes you have to destroy something completely before you can really see it. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Light poured straight down on the oak table, where I sat beside Erin, her stack of files forming a wall between me and everything that used to be home. The judge's voice echoed, Miss Monroe, do you wish to proceed with this case even though it involves your immediate family? I said yes, clear and steady. When Erin began presenting evidence, my fingers trembled against the table. The documents were laid out, the forged digital signature, the IP address traced to my parents' house, the printed email that read, Just let her cover it. She won't notice. My father had written that. The air thickened. My mother started crying. April buried her face in her hands. I felt nothing, only the rhythm of my own pulse, slow and deliberate, like an old wound reopening. A handwriting expert confirmed what we already knew. The signature had been cloned, using a scan of my real one, taken from a 2015 mortgage document, the same year I saved their house. The irony twisted like a knife. They'd used my past kindness to trap me again. When the verdict came, the judge's tone was formal, detached. The court finds that the signature of Ms. Nancy Monroe was falsified. She is cleared of all financial liability. There was no triumph, no satisfaction, only release, an emptiness so clean it almost felt like peace. Outside, Erin asked if I regretted it. Regret is the one lesson they taught me well. I told her, but I'm done studying it. I'll keep my self-respect instead. That evening, back in my studio, I switched on the lamp. My painting of the fractured house was nearly complete. I drew a thin streak of light cutting through the roof, sharp and bright as lightning. I titled it, The Line Between Us. 2 months after the verdict, I woke to the buzz of a notification on my phone. The headline glared back at me. Monroe Residence, 1258 Oak Ridge Avenue, for sale. The first photo was the dining room, the same room where I'd once sat while they laughed. Now it was empty, just dull yellow light stretching across the hardwood floor. A red tag in the corner of the listing read for sale. There was no triumph in it, only the strange ache of something finally loosening in my chest, like glass being lifted after years of pressing down. That afternoon, a text from my mother appeared. A final dinner, sweetheart. Before the house is gone, I hesitated, then drove south through the desert. The heat hit the windshield in dry waves, carrying the scent of dust and smoke. When I arrived, the house looked the same but felt hollowed out, as if someone had quietly taken the walls away. My father sat at the table, eyes shadowed. My mother was serving her Sunday roast, the last one she would ever make here. April sat across from me, phone tucked away for once, her hands still. No one spoke. Only the faint scrape of forks against porcelain filled the silence. I looked at the three of them, people who had once been my whole world, and said softly, "I won't cut you off, but I won't save you anymore." No one argued. My father gave a slow nod. My mother dabbed her eyes. April kept staring at her plate. The silence that followed wasn't hostile this time. It was the quiet surrender of a past finally letting go. When I stepped outside, the wind caught the curtain through the open door, snapping it like a loose sail. I turned back once. The house looked smaller, lighter, as if the desert wind was already erasing it. Just before I reached my car, April ran out, breathless, holding a folded slip of paper. "I paid back $3,000. She said. "It's not much." But I started. I smiled faintly. For the first time, you did something right. As I drove away, I watched the house shrink in the rearview mirror until it was nothing but a blur of color. 3 faint strokes of chalk the wind would soon erase. Back in Boulder, life slid quietly back into rhythm. Lectures, paint under my nails, breakfast by the window. But even the sunlight felt different now, sharper, cleaner, as if it had learned how to touch things without burning them. One morning, an email from April appeared in my inbox. The subject line read, "I'm sorry." She wrote that she was working in a thrift shop, earning just enough to get by. There wasn't much left in her life, she said, but it finally felt lighter. She didn't ask for forgiveness, just wanted me to know she understood. I read it twice, then left it unopened on my screen all day, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. That night, I typed one line back. "I don't resent you, but I'll never be anyone's wallet again." Then I hit send and exhaled. The next afternoon, Erin showed up at my studio with a bottle of white wine. She smiled faintly as she handed it to me. "You won," she said, "but you don't seem like someone who needs to celebrate." I laughed softly. Winning was never the point. The real victory was learning how to stay silent without feeling guilty for it. She nodded. Silence is the hardest answer. Before she left, she set a sealed envelope on my table. Inside was a photograph, me standing in the courtroom, sunlight slicing through the window, falling across my shoulders. Erin's handwriting on the back read, "Keep this, to remember that light sometimes comes from the coldest places." That evening, I framed the photo and hung it beside my nearly finished painting. The line between us. One was reality, one was art, but both told the same truth. Sometimes, distance is the only form of kindness left. By summer, the canvas that had haunted my studio for months was finally finished. A house split clean in half, and through that fracture poured the light of a rising sun. I called it the house we built. When the university hosted its annual faculty exhibition, they hung it in the main hall, front and center, where morning light from the skylight hit just right. Beneath the frame, I wrote a single line in black ink. "Some homes fall apart so we can build our own." Students paused to study it. I watched them from a distance, heads tilted, whispering theories. One young woman approached me and asked whose house it was. I smiled. "My own," I said. "Not the one I was born in, but the one where I learned how to stand again." That evening, back in my apartment, I left the windows open. The summer wind drifted in, warm and smelling faintly of rain and turpentine. I poured a glass of wine and lifted it toward the empty room. No laughter, no sarcasm, no hollow apologies. Just the hum of the city below, and the kind of silence that feels earned. I thought of Erin's photograph, me standing in the courtroom, the light cutting across my shoulders. I thought of the old house in Scottsdale, maybe stripped bare now, the curtains gone, dust curling in the corners. And I thought of April somewhere out there, learning how to carry her own weight for the first time. For once, peace didn't feel like forgiveness. It felt like release. I set the glass down, picked up my brush, and added one final stroke to a fresh canvas. A thin, sharp beam of light slicing through shadow. A single line dividing the dark from the dawn. The room went still. In the reflection on the windowpane, I saw myself, not a victim, not the martyr they once expected me to be, but someone who had survived with dignity intact, and quietly, almost like a prayer. I thought, you can laugh all you want, April. In the end, I found something your jokes, your love, and even your forgiveness could never give me. absolute freedom within myself.